Hi there, and welcome to the Curious Collective podcast, conversations designed for the veteran and first responder community to bring awareness to those holistic practices to help you live your best life. So, tap into the wisdom and knowledge of our guests to heal, transform, and live as your true soulful self. Listeners, today with us, we have the amazing Mike Armstrong. Welcome, Mike, to the Curious Collective.
Thank you for having me. Wonderful to be able to chat.
Now, I actually came across Mike on Instagram and through my beautiful friend Sarah to do with his artwork, which I'm sure he'll talk a lot into, which I think is amazing, and the work that he's done in that space. But this is a very talented man that's doing many things in many places. So, without further ado, I'm going to hand over with your first question, Mike, which is, what is it that you do these days, and what makes your heart sing?
Mm, I think that's a really beautiful question to ask anyone. What makes your heart sing? Well, my communities make my heart sing, and I have
Mm,
communities around art and martial arts. They're my two main sort of spaces that I work in now. I run an artist studio. Unfortunately, I'm in the process of packing it up and having to move at the moment, but I've been running an art studio for about 8 or 9 years in Canberra, where I've been working with veterans and first responders, both on one basis and in workshops. And that allows me to make my own art and help tell my stories, but also I help others tell their stories either through their creative process or them collaborating with me and becoming a muse or a subject that we can sort of generate conversation around their experiences and
oh,
help them to
cool.
express that. So that's what I love about art making, is about storytelling. And then martial arts, so the arts program is called Voices of Veterans, and that culminated with it sort of grew out of an exhibition that has travelled around Australia now, sharing stories about veterans living with PTSD. And so if anyone wants to sort of check that out, check out the Mike Armstrong Instagram and Voices of Veterans website, and you can learn
Such a
more
great
about that.
name. Where did you come up with that?
I think originally it was voices, and my partner goes, "Voices? What are you talking about? Are you talking about the voices in your head or something?" Like she was like, she's pretty brutal. She is a trained sort of journalist and comms professional. So she's when I say she's brutal when like when you're trying to express a story. She's like, "That's not clear enough."
Yeah.
And she's like, "Who's it voices for?" And I go, "For veterans, of course," sort of thing. And so
Mm,
it sort of just became Voices of
it
Veterans.
evolved.
It evolved into that. And it's become, I guess, the banner for which the workshops and the mentoring operates under,
Mm,
even though in the background there's that specific exhibition that's still traveling around, and it's going across to Adelaide later this year, a few of the works to be part of a veteran show over there. And then it's going up for a solo show in Toowoomba early next year. And again, I
okay.
travel up with those events and run workshops and continue the conversations
Mhm.
in each of those spaces. The other side of the work that I do, I've been a lifelong martial artist. And I've studied many arts, and I've been teaching Brazilian Jiu Jitsu for a bit over 20 years now. And what I found, because I was teaching, I'd run clubs when I was overseas on deployments, and time again, individuals would go, "This was the highlight of my trip. This helped me to
Yeah.
get through like these tough
Mm,
times." And so I've always run that training and the community and the support that you get from those individuals, because it's very trust based
mm,
practice, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. There's a lot of physical contact. It's a grappling art. And if you can't trust the person you are training with, you're going to get hurt very,
yeah.
very quickly. So you get a sense of who someone is in about 10 seconds.
Yeah.
Do they just launch for your throat and try to gouge your eyes, or are they going to be a safe and respectful training partner? You figure
Mm,
that out very quickly. And so what I've created with Rogue BJJ is a members only Brazilian Jiu Jitsu club. And um, the way I describe is we run a Brazilian Jiu Jitsu training that's available for anyone, but it's not for everyone. And what that means is that we are open and inclusive for all backgrounds, injuries, body types, health, age, sort of whatever you bring to the party. But what we ask of our community is that you need to put the safety and well-being of the community first, because there's no point engaging in a well-being practice if you're getting hurt.
Yeah.
Like, it's self-defeating, and it's so obvious that you laugh about it. But so many martial arts clubs, they're just hurting their members all the time, and there's this attrition. And so I believe the vast majority of people give up on their martial arts career because of injuries. And that's what I was finding. Like, friends that I trained years ago, they were like, "Oh, Mike, I haven't been training for the last 2 years because I was just getting hurt all the time." So I'm like, well, what if we create a club where we actually don't hurt each other? Like, how revolutionary is that? Like, what is it, like that we actually agree that no one here is going to be the next world champion. We're going to put ego aside, and we're just going to put the community first. And so that's what we do. And it's a beautiful group. And we run about 6 training sessions a week at the moment. And we've got a mix of veterans, first responders, and members of the public. And I do that both in the Voices of Veterans program and in the martial arts program. And I found that that's actually my preference. I don't actually want to run veteran only activities or first responder only activities, because I think there's a power in sharing stories and experiences that allows us to humanize others. And it's also healthier to have that diversity. If I get 20 veterans from one area, I'm guaranteed to get the same sort of banter and negativity that will come out of that group. Whereas if you diversify the experiences a little bit, they start to remember it all wasn't that bad, and also you start to realize that across those communities, you actually have more in common than not.
Yeah.
And that's really important for me. So I run those 2 programs. I'm also an artist in resident at University of Canberra. I do a lot of academic sort of writing, and I'm trying to sort of get my research together. I'm a visiting fellow at University of New South Wales as well, doing a different line of research there. And I'm likely to, I'm in the process of sort of putting together a PhD proposal for next year as well. So continuing to expand the arts and the martial arts. We're moving school into a larger premises, into a full-time premises rather than a part-time premises. And I've been working with several instructors to have them come on board, because I don't have the capacity to do more hours there, but through the community that we're growing, they can start to foster and mentor and develop, and so that community can grow as well. I think that's, to me, like that's success, is where the individuals that I supported then can turn around and can support others, and that, to me, like, that's a win. I don't want anyone to ever to be dependent on what I'm having to do for them. Success is when they're able to do things independent of that.
Absolutely. Shows good leadership, right?
I think so. I think that's what some of the lessons I took from the good leaders that I worked with in the military. And then the third thing, I'm supporting my partner Tracy, who runs Flow and Food, which is a yoga, well-being, food-based practice where she supports people through mindful eating and mindful practice. And she's been using she's been integrating some of that into Rogue BJJ. And then as that's grown, she's sort of at the point where she's like, all right, I think I need to expand out of that as well. So helping to support her in that process. And she supports me a great deal in my enterprises as well. So it's a real team effort.
Sounds good. And I mean, I know a lot of people that do martial arts also need that beautiful flow and feminine sort of touch with a little bit of the yoga as well, and to
Mm.
eat properly so that, you know, you're fueling your body right to recover from injury and support
Yeah,
yourself better.
absolutely. Yeah, if too much of the masculine is not good, and balance in all things, I guess, is what her advice would be to me. So when we talk about like the martial arts side of it, it's actually a movement based practice,
Hmm.
and so our with the yoga, breath work, we're going to be integrating sort of more meditation as people become more comfortable with that. And I'd love to get an ice bath and sauna in our next facility if we've got room for it.
Yeah,
So we
make it
can so we
happen.
can do that. We can do that as well.
All,
Yeah. So it
all the
becomes
things.
a holistic wellness sort of little center. Would be great.
Absolutely. Gosh, I wish I lived closer now. I'd come all the
Mm,
time.
yeah.
What a beautiful combination of things you've got going on there. You've sort of covered all bases. There's so much to unpack there, and I've got so many questions, but I'm going to start with the art. So, do you have a lot of people come to you initially that say like, I'm not creative, I can't do art, da 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 da, da, and you've sort of show them what they have got untapped within them?
Yeah, I think like that is such a common statement that I hear from people like, "Oh, you must be talented, and I have no talent, and I can't do art." And I'm like,
Mm,
"Well, of, of course you can, and of course I'm not. Like the reason why I'm good at what I'm doing is because I've been doing it for a long time and practiced a lot and studied it. And if you were to look at my original drawings, like they're terrible.
mm,
And I think remembering that we're all on a journey, and art is a practice,
mm.
um, um,
Just
is
to trust
important.
yourself.
Yeah, trust yourself. So I run um, uh, some of the workshops I run, like life drawing and sculpting from life. They're two really beautiful practices that are important to my own development. So
Mm,
I pass them on, and they're very mindful based. And I take people, like the vast majority of people that come to those workshops have never drawn since
mm,
sort of a bit dabbling in primary school sort of thing.
yeah.
And for the sculpting workshop, most of them have never even touched clay before.
Mm.
And by the end of it, they're always surprised. Like, I actually got this drawing, or I actually did this sculpture,
Yeah.
and it's actually
Achievement.
good.
Mm.
And I'm like, exactly. Like, it's with a little bit of knowledge and a little bit of practice, you can do things. And I think that's a really important thing for people to remember, that they're actually much more capable than what they realized. And once we can get past the skill level, which is why I start with those practices, because what they're doing is training. I think the two most important characteristics that an artist needs to have is the ability to see, or their discernment, that ability to observe with clarity, and then the hand skills that go with that, describing that discernment. And so that's what I teach in those practices. And then in the background of that, we it's giving them permission that their stories are actually interesting and are worth sharing. And then it's sort of, once they've got that confidence, then they're off and racing, and they're
Yeah.
just making, and they're just telling stories. And then I'm
Mm.
like, okay, beautiful. That's what we want.
Well, I like that. I felt that through my whole body. That's a good one.
Oh, beautiful.
How awesome. And now, the thing that you mentioned with your Brazilian Jiu Jitsu that really got a question in my mind was when people reflected on doing it overseas on deployment, and they've said that that was a highlight. What do you think with the Jiu Jitsu or the grappling and the movements is it that gives them that anchor to that or that memory?
Um, well, there's a strong community bond that's developed through touch.
Mm,
So touch, movement, and breath is such a powerful engagement tool with the body, and with the experiences that we hold within it. And so people feel an extraordinarily strong sense of community and connection
mm,
in those moments. And so when you're in the midst of a war zone, and you're able to sort of step out of that even for an hour and to be able to do something, and you have to be mindful. You don't get a choice
No,
because they're trying to choke you,
you're stuck in
and
high
so
mount
you're
and
stuck
they've
in
got their
it. Yep,
knees around your head.
yeah. So and so it's meditation for those people that can't meditate because it's too noisy, and it allows them to focus on single things, and it's like all their worries were put on a shelf
You have to be
for a
present.
moment. Have to be present. It's like I was talking about with you before with the ice bath, that the ice bath cuts through the noise. The ice is so clear in its message to the body that there is no other distraction except the ice. And so with Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, it's the same, where there's this sort of, when I'm in that moment, I can't think about anything other than that. And so I have people that come to me today, and they've got just horrendous things going on in their life, and they come onto the mat, and they come in with the weight of the world on their shoulders, and then 5 minutes into it, they're in there in that moment, whether they like it or not, and then at the end of the session, they're sort of like, oh man, I feel so much better because I was able to take off that load for an hour.
Yeah.
And just the relief that gives. For an hour, I didn't think about that. And then you've got all the release of good hormones into the body that comes from touch and exercise and all that sort of connection. So there's so many things going on from a physiological, biological, and psychological sort of standpoint with Brazilian Jiu Jitsu that I just love. That that just sort of echoes through that practice.
I actually have a story to share. I had never heard of Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, and in 2005, when I was overseas, there was Dutch, us Australians, one para British in this on this base, and I was in the gym on the elliptical trainer as you do, and I'm just like, what are those guys doing? And it didn't matter where they were from; they would just line up on the side of the mat, and then these guys were grappling, which I had no idea what it was. I'm like, what the heck is going on? But it didn't matter what army you were from, how tall you were, how short you were, it didn't matter. They were just like hugging on the floor. I thought, oh, they're hugging. That's
They're
nice.
hugging, aggressive hugging.
I'm like, oh, I could watch this all day.
Yeah.
But they would just line up, and then that was a way of them connecting and meeting people from different armed forces in a way that was a controlled form of aggression between allies, I guess. And they'd be friends ever since. They just sweated together.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've still got connections to members of the US Armed Forces, the Spanish Forces, Timorese, New Zealanders, Brits, Canadians. Like like over the years, you collect these sort of interactions, and to the point now, I can almost can't go anywhere without I'll bump into someone and they go, oh, and they will introduce themselves, and I'm like, my memory is quite hazy because of my injuries, but they'll go, oh yeah, I'm such and such, and you trained me in East Timor, and it was wonderful, and I'm like, and I'm like, I can't. They remember me.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But I unfortunately quite often I can't
Can't
remember
remember
them.
everyone.
I can't remember everyone. I've trained thousands of people over the years, and but it stood out to them as being such an important moment. And then my next question usually is, "Are you still training?"
Yeah.
And it always warms my heart when they say yes.
Yeah.
One gentleman just recently got his black belt in BJJ.
Oh, awesome.
And he had started off quite a few now that have started off their training with me and now are black belts in BJJ and running their own clubs around Australia,
wow,
which I
that's
think is just
fantastic.
fabulous.
So I love all this work you're doing now. Tell me, what was your journey to get to this across the years?
Look, I spent 23 years in the Army, enlisted as an aircraft technician, went across to the Royal Military College relatively early in my career, became a signals officer, though I've done probably no standard signal officer jobs ever. Ended up in teaching unarmed combat in Army and was a senior unarmed combat instructor for a long while, and to commando, did selection, got injured very early on in the reinforcement cycle, but ended up at the unit anyway as a non-qual in that organisation. Was on tag, contingency, deployed overseas with the SOTG, electronic warfare, deployments to Timor, Iraq, and Afghanistan, and finished my career up after doing a Master's of Cybersecurity back when in 2016, and then ended up in the basement of ASD as an embed, and then was one of the founding members of the Joint Cyber Unit when that got stood up, when they realised that cyber needs to be a thing. And so I was on the forefront of that. And but around that time was when my health symptoms started to deteriorate, and eventually I was, after many years of struggling with that, I was eventually diagnosed with PTSD.
And the body said no.
The body said no, yeah. And it just, eventually my body just shut down, one thing after another. And I lost my memory. My short-term memory was almost non-existent, to the point where I was sort of goldfishing my way through the day, and I'd introduce myself to people and then 2 minutes later go back and reintroduce myself to them. And one day I did that 3 times to the same person. And that was a pretty terrifying day when that happened, and embarrassing, one thing, but terrifying. And I couldn't read anymore. I could barely see. I couldn't make art. And I in chronic pain from about 2017. And so the cognitive impairment was the bit. Like I could struggle through the pain, but the cognitive impairment and the vision loss were the bits that sort of got to the point where I was no longer functional in the workplace, even though my bosses kept saying, "Oh, you're doing fine, keep going." On the inside, I knew that I was barely hanging on, and eventually I was sent to hospital on a recommendation of a doctor. And despite my belief that I didn't have PTSD, I was diagnosed with PTSD, and then began treatment, and have gone through a range of different treatments for that. But eventually that led to the discharge, and that was the right. That was the right step. My capacity for stress is pretty low. Like the symptoms come back very, very quickly if I'm overloaded in.
Do you feel that threshold lowered because you'd gone so far living in that high state of stress?
Oh, I'd probably been living with PTSD symptoms for 10 to 15 years, and so I'd been numbed myself to the world, relationships, and everything, and just sort of kept going. And eventually the symptoms, the physiological symptoms, sort of broke through. And so they're the ones that I sort of can't ignore now. So so it's sort of like very, very quickly my pain levels will become quite heightened, to the point where it's very hard to function, to think. Facial twitches will return. Memory loss will start to happen again. I'll lose weeks, like weeks will suddenly just become hazy. I'm like, oh, I'll be teaching BJJ, and I'm like, I can't remember what I taught this morning in that class. And I can't even remember who was there, sort of thing. And so I sort of like, I start to recognize that in myself, and my partner's very good at recognizing those signs in me as well. And she's like, okay, you need to sort of put the brakes on a bit. I'm not very good at that, at putting the brakes on.
What are your main tools that you go to when you notice those things coming up, that you've got a better awareness, self-awareness now?
Yeah, yoga is very important to me. But when I'm in a chronic state, yoga is quite hard, like, because I have high pain, pain throughout all my joints, plus migraine. I have a headache. I haven't had a day without a headache since 2017. and quite often it's the cusp of a migraine or a migraine on any given day as well when my stress levels are high, in particular. But the headache's always there, and it's just is it a sharp pain or is it a thumper today? Like which one is it going to be? And so sometimes getting on the mat and doing a slow yoga class in that state is not good. But a hot yoga or a fast yoga, okay, that gives me enough of a focus to sort of allow me to work through that pain. When it's really bad, ice bath.
Yeah.
And so I'll go book myself into one of the many places in Canberra, and I'll
Soon you'll have your own.
with any luck.
Headphones have just gone flat on me. I'm just going to take.
We can still hear you beautifully.
All right. Yeah. So I'll book myself into one of those, and I'll go do a cold hot sort of series. I've been working with a friend of mine who she's a senior Wim Hof trainer, Leah, and she's been fabulous. And I've been up to Thredbo and worked with her up there, walking in the snow and shorts, swimming in Thredbo River, and I've even done some work with her with an army unit. We've gone out and I've supported her and delivering to them. I think the ice for me is when things are bad. That's the best way to sort of break through that. And I start the day with breath work and cold every day. I try to do that as well, and that's a really good way of starting the day.
What do you feel that does for you on the physical level?
Oh, clarity of mind. It seems to allow, like the dopamine release that you get with that helps with the brain function, but also lowering the perception of pain levels as well in the body. The energy that I get from that is beautiful as well. So the adrenaline that you get from the breath work, the low level adrenaline as well, where you're in a position where you're exposing yourself to adrenaline and sitting with that, and then able to bring calm back to that. So the breath work's very good at doing that. And there's a whole bunch of like cold shock proteins and lowering of inflammation, so that helps to lower the joint pain. And so there's a raft of benefits from the cold, which is why the longer I've done it, the more of a proponent and an advocate for it for in the lives of those people that are living with similar conditions. Like I recommend it because you're getting a lot of you're getting better benefits than you get from antidepressants, and you're doing it without the medication, that sort of medical intervention.
Naturally.
So I can't overdose. Well, I mean, you can go hypothermic if you're not careful. So you could overdose in that sense. But if you're smart about it, it's a very safe protocol to use. Like it's a safe tool in my tool belt that I can call on. Whereas other numbing agents like drugs or alcohol or excessive exercise or things like that, which I've got friends that you're using that not as a tool for health, but you're using that as a tool for numbing, and that's not healthy for anyone. And so, whereas yoga, meditation, breath work, and cold, like that's accessible and safe. And so that's why I sort of lean on the side of those sorts of modalities.
Absolutely. And for me, that common thread of being present with it. I mean, all of the things you've mentioned require presence, whereas some of the other not so healthy self-medications sort of are an escapism.
Yes.
Which temporarily works, but you can't keep escaping. So yeah, I love the ones that you've talked into. What I do want to ask you is, throughout the journey of coming back and working through your PTSD, you mentioned that sometimes you were even disconnected from your art. So what has brought you back to your tapping into your creative self when you've felt disconnected from that part?
Look, you mentioned Sarah early on, and Sarah was key in that experience for me. So I can't even think of the date, 2020 it might have been. My symptoms were so bad that I realized I couldn't even discern color that I was looking at. Like I'm looking at the paint palette, I'm looking at my painting, and I'm like, am I painting blue or green or red? I actually don't know. My brain was so fried that I couldn't tell. And so I locked my studio door and left. And I didn't go back for 2 or 3 months, but I sort of had that insatiable itch to sort of keep creating. And Sarah was working as a life model around Canberra at the time. And I reached out to her and I said, hey, mate, like, do you feel like you could come and model for me? And I've got an old camera. I'd like to take some photos. And but I don't know how to do this. Like straight up, like I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm willing to sort of see if we can figure this out. I need to create. And she was really good about it. And so we sort of organized once or twice a week. She would come in, and we just treated it as a technical problem. Like I was like, okay, this week I've got one candle. We're going to do the whole shoot with one candle, and I needed to figure out like, and so. For me, the avenue back in was by removing the requirement to sort of get explicitly creative from the very beginning. Like I wasn't creating artwork. That wasn't my intention. My intention was just to get in there and have a practice. And through that practice, artworks emerged organically from that practice. And so that sort of style of play has continued on since that day. And so when I'm not well, what I will tend to do is I will do life drawing or sculpting from life, or I will, and so those actions remove the burden of what are you going to make today? Well, I know what I'm going to make. I've got a model in front of me.
Yeah.
I'm drawing this portrait, and that's the process. Yeah. But out of that allows me to, like, those practices for me are very mindful. They allow me to sort of relax, ease into the moment. I'm always in dialogue with the people that are in my studio, and we're having this conversation, and out of that conversation sparks an idea, and then suddenly we're making art.
Yeah, I love that.
And so that's
spontaneity, which is all about that creative flow when you're in flow state, isn't it? If you can't access that spontaneity, that's your block.
Yeah. So I'm now, like, there are no bad days in the studio. You just do. These are the things you practice and you do. And some days you'll make art and sometimes you'll make mess, and that's okay. You just do. And
that's just life as well, though, isn't it? Like, you could use the same analogy.
Oh, 100%. So everything that I do, I'm trying to sort of, the lessons that I'm learning in BJJ, art and yoga, and every aspect, like, it's about this. There is no more duality. It used to be that there was artist Mike and military Mike, and they were these two different personalities that existed in these two different worlds and behaved differently because of the rules of those different environments and my expectations on myself in those environments. Whereas now it's like, no, you just get me. Yeah. In all those environments, you just get me. And the way
it takes so much pressure off you, because you just have to be you. Like, you're not having to be this dualities, you know, of the two people. Yeah. And it's really useful to look at, to look at my art through the lens of the martial arts training, and to look at art through the lens of yoga and the principles that I'm learning in that, and vice versa. So the crossover and the conversations that I have with my partner have been wonderful, because they in turn spark new insight as you start to sort of realize that things are more the same than different. Yeah. That's true for people, and that's true for these philosophies within these areas. And a mentor of mine, John Will, he always sort of
always found it odd where he was working with a martial artist, and when they're on the mat, they're like this Zen monk, like they're the most sort of put together person. And Tracy and I have experienced that with yoga instructors, like on the mat, like they are like channeling the forces of the universe, like they are amazing. And then 5 minutes out, so you're in the coffee shop with them, and they're losing their temper, or they're swearing about something, or
they don't know what to order off the menu because their brains are scattery mess.
Yeah, or they're pulling out a cigarette and having a smoke, and you're just sort of like, oh, okay, that was an act. Like that was an act. Like this is like, and so, yeah, this realization that I'm trying not to act. I'm trying to sort of like
true authenticity.
Like you just do, like I think it's disingenuous if you spout all these ideals, but then you turn around and you're doing something different. So I'm very interested in what people say, but I'm more interested in what people do.
Yeah.
And I look at myself very critically in that light, and trying to do better.
Doing an amazing job. I would love for the listeners to, pull out of this exactly what they need to go and try new things. So today, I know you've spoken into the art. There's talk of you moving around. I heard maybe next year bringing your art up here. Is this for the Voices of Veterans show up in Toowoomba? But you do shift about and do workshops as you go?
Yeah, I'm always looking for opportunities to travel and to work with new communities. And so I'm open to invites. So the main problem that I have at the moment is finding suitable venues. And I am reluctant to set up in RSL halls and military bases and things like that. I'm much more interested in setting up in art galleries and places like that, where they're much more accessible to the broader community. Because I think having the conversation within the military environment means that the audience is going to be narrow. And whereas I want the audience to be as broad as possible. So the Toowoomba shows at the University of Southern Queensland, they've built a new art gallery up there, and they've invited me to bring the show up. And so that's fabulous. So that allows me to invite military people into an art space, which is new for a lot of military people, but also expose people within that university space that aren't necessarily exposed to the military experience, to be able to sort of share those stories with them. And that's equally as important.
Yeah, I love that.
Because I think when you can start to put a face and a name to these experiences, we start to humanize, and that builds empathy. Which is a beautiful thing.
Absolutely. And I feel like both ways too. It increases our empathic resonance as us and with others. I love that.
That's certainly, like with the range of people that I have come into my studio to make art with me, I feel enormously privileged to be able to share the stories that we've shared together in that space. And I've learned so much about like life experiences that I will never have because I'm who I am and when I was born and where I was born and my upbringing and my experiences to date. But through these shared stories, you suddenly start to realize that the richness of the world out there.
Absolutely. And everyone's, ability to live their full human experience, and us then to tap into ours. Like, we're only here to do that. So why aren't we doing it?
Yeah. It's a short life.
Yeah.
Make use of it.
I love everything that you've shared today, and I could actually talk to you all day long, but we will round it up now with, if any of the listeners are interested in any of the different multifaceted things that you do, or if you've got any sage advice for them, what would you like to say?
Okay. Well, I'll start with the easy ones, which is where I am. So Mike Armstrong on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. I think I'm on all of them. Voicesofveterans.com.au on the web for that program. roguebjjstudios.com.au for the martial arts program, and flowandfood.com.au for Tracy's wellness program there. The sage advice, oh, look, I don't know if I'm qualified to give sage advice. I think the best advice I can give is I thought that suffering was what I needed to do. Like that putting up with the pain, putting up with the discomfort, denying myself the care and the resources I need to be able to look after myself was what I needed to do. And I sacrificed a lot for a very long time. And that actually wasn't the right thing for me or the right thing for my family. And so taking the time to look after yourself in order to be able to turn up and be the best version of you for the community around you, whatever that community may be, I encourage you to give yourself permission to do that.
Yes. The best version of you for you first, and then obviously for the community around you. I feel like, you know, we sometimes put everyone else ahead of ourselves, even to the discredit of ourselves. So
yeah, absolutely.
You chose you in the end when your body said, hey, listen to me right now. and you still choose yourself every day, I do hope.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mike. And I have very much enjoyed our conversation. Katie out.